Hello and welcome to Emotions and the Aging Process. Today we'll be speaking about our communal responsibility to caregivers and care receivers and how we can all work together, whether we're at home or in institutions, taking care of people as they age and or as they become ill. This is the final segment of our 10-part series, and I'm really thrilled to be joined today by, of course, Dr. Ron Ceppetelli, and our guests, Robin Enos and Christina Healy. Robin, you have been a caregiver. You have a lot of experience in your home as a caregiver, and you're a familiar face in our local community. Often with a smile, you're the postmistress in our local post office. And Christina, you're a consultant and a therapist. You've specialized for over 20 years as a psychiatric nurse clinician. You work primarily with geriatric patients and their families. You have presented on a variety of topics that are relevant to this series, including addictions in the elderly and caring for Alzheimer's patients and their families. And you still work in nursing homes throughout Massachusetts. Welcome. Robin, first of all, I'm so terribly sorry for the losses that you've endured over the last few years. The caretaking role that you had primarily had to do with your most recent loss of your husband. Tell us about Tony.
Well, my husband was diagnosed just about 9 years ago with male breast cancer, which is extremely rare and very aggressive. And he fought for 8.5 years. He was on chemo for 8.5 years straight. There was never a time that he was not on chemo. And he died at home in my arms with the help of hospice there. But it was a very difficult journey for him and for me.
How long was he, bedridden? Was he incapacitated?
He was, they brought the hospice bed in probably about 6 months before he passed. He was pretty much bedridden the last, I'm going to say month and a half. He did have one rally day that really surprised me, really, because he had not gotten out of the bed at all, and the doctor had came to the house to check on him, and we were talking, and all of a sudden the doctor said, "Well, speak of the devil," and I went, "Excuse me," and Anthony was standing right behind me. Yeah. And,
how special.
Well, it was, but it was also difficult because he thought that he was trying to get out of his car, and the side rails were the car doors, and he couldn't get out. So,
was that a result of the medication?
No, that was just a rally day. That was him trying to prove that he was still here.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he had a will to live, but he couldn't beat the cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have a full-time job.
I do. I'm the postmaster. I'm a postmaster, so.
And it's hard for me to imagine how you, as a sole caregiver, were able to handle your full life as a loving wife and caretaker and your job outside the home. Were there any particular difficulties you can share with us?
It was difficult. It was, time management became my best friend. Scheduling things at work and finding help to, replace me while I was gone. But I never brought in somebody to replace me at work. I did what I could at work. My boss was very, very, good with me being away when I needed to. But time management was trying to coordinate everything. And
did you ever sleep?
Very rarely, very rarely. If I got 4 hours a day, I was good.
Well, that alone is a huge stressor. So you hardly had time. You didn't have full time for work, really. Were you at all able to take care of your own needs, like eat well, get some exercise, appreciate the sunshine?
To be honest with you, I put me on the back burner because my entire focus was on him. I would be at work when I could, but be home all the rest of the time to take care of him.
Now, I have the feeling that both Dr. Ceppetelli and Chris, you're hearing Robin's story, you have some questions about perhaps what could have gone better and what she went through. What can we learn from this?
Absolutely. And my question is, did anybody try to take care of you during this time?
Not really. You know, there was friends and families that had, you know, good intentions. I learned that death and dying has, each person has a different perspective of how they handle it, and they would come to visit to see him, but it was more of a chore for me because I felt like I had to entertain them while they were there. You know, they really didn't sit with Tony, but there wasn't really any help, you know.
What, can you teach us what would have been helpful for you for community, caregivers, or family? What would have been helpful for you?
If there was a support system for helping with his appointments, helping him with his chemo treatments, you know, or just somebody coming by for an hour so I could go to the grocery store, or just get out and go to my doctor's appointments. I put most of my doctor's appointments off because I didn't have the help.
And nobody helped you express your emotions and so forth around this time?
Yeah. To be honest, there was the chaplain from hospice, you know, would call, but I really had a difficult time with the religious aspect during that time because of everything that was going on. So there could have been more help.
It sounds as though people, and this is not a new phenomenon, people aren't sure. People cared very much about you and Anthony, but they didn't know what you needed. It's not a time when you should have been expected to speak up because of the huge stress and sadness. So the rest of us, would you say, you professionals, what should the rest of us do? Should we ask questions? Should we just ask, how can we help? Here you are, would you like me to, should somehow regular people in our lives, our family members, be trained? Should this be part of our schooling? Because we're all going to encounter this someday in our own lives or in the lives of our family and friends. I'm here, just to look someone in the eye and say, I'm here for you. Do you need 2 hours to go to the grocery store to nap? I mean, how do we come together as a community? This is our segment on communal responsibility.
Right. What Robin is eloquently describing here is the lack of a community support. There should be some community support where several members of the community come in, sit with her and her husband, and talk about living and what they need to live and what would be beneficial and so forth.
And in this part of the world, excuse me, that will include, I think Robin alluded to this, you were saying transportation. You said you needed more support for getting him to his appointments.
Correct.
And there isn't, and this is true of many areas, there's no kind of public system, even if you had to pay for it.
Right.
Which is true in more urban areas.
Right.
But much of the United States does not have that
I
kind of
think
service.
if there was a larger volunteer system with hospice, where, you know, it's kind of like the Best Buddies program, which I'm very passionate about. If there was, like, if hospice could create a system where they would buddy up somebody with the patient that would, you know, be there at a consistent basis. And that was one of the biggest things with, you know, changing nurses constantly, or, you know, building that constant trust and consistency with the patient and the caretaker, and providing that extra help when there wasn't any.
This reminds me of other conversations we've had throughout this series what Robin just said, consistency. When you have investment, the staff people, the caregivers, have, I mean, obviously you were invested, but your hospice nurses, they're invested because they have gotten to know you. You've had conversations. They understand your needs and are not afraid to ask, what do I not understand?
Right.
We all have to be able to say those really 3 important words, I don't know. Tell me how to improve
Exactly.
my game.
Exactly.
So that kind of, the system needs to include, we've said, transportation, full receptive listening, which is related to mindfulness
Right.
and the ability to say, I don't know.
And one part that we rarely hear about in these situations is we rarely hear from the patient, from her husband. What does he want for Robin? What does he want to do? And how can the community support that? So we have to be able to sit around and talk and be receptive to other people so
Absolutely.
everyone can get to say what they really want to say and then understand what you need. And it's not that it's just the transportation to, appointment, which is wonderful, okay?
Right.
But it's many other things. Maybe there's a relative has a birthday party she'd like to go to. Maybe her husband wants to go out and go to a park and visit a park and so forth. And how do they organize that and so forth? So if it's not a consistent meeting and people learn to understand each other, okay, then we go to this kind of case management. Okay, it is the appointment, we'll set somebody
Right.
up for that and so forth. Somebody's going to clean your house and so forth. And as you said,
That would have been wonderful.
yeah, right. Did you have a house cleaner?
No.
All right, so you had to clean your house as well,
Right.
besides taking care of your husband for 8.5 years.
Yes.
You're an extraordinary woman, that's what I want to say.
Thank you.
What would you say, Dr. Ceppetelli, Robin, Christina, to someone, and I'm bringing the following up because I've seen it happen in people who are ordinarily very empathic, giving, generous, kind, love their friends. They're faced with death. Someone I know is faced with the imminent death of the spouse of a good friend. This woman was dying of ovarian cancer. And the friend did nothing. Because he said, I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can say. I can't save her. What could I possibly say or do to help the husband who's obviously going to be left behind? And so how do we coach people to being able to say, it's okay that I don't know. I don't know what to say. And it's okay that I don't know what to say. How can I be there?
That goes back to Dr. Ceppetelli's thinking about receptive listening, for somebody to be able to say, I don't know what to do or what have you, then it is going back to the caretaker, it's going back to the patient and asking them what would be the best thing for you.
Right, that's right, Chris. And what it sounds like in the case of this person you're describing is he was actually projecting himself onto that dying person, just as our aides projected onto the residents.
Yeah.
And this person is dying, okay, so if I was like that, I just want to die.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know what this person wants or what Robin wants and so forth. And so again, if he's allowed to start, expressing all his thoughts and feelings and understanding Robin and her husband better, then the results will be quite different.
I think that's a big part of it. And in addition, there are at least some people, maybe a lot of people, who, again, don't like that feeling of I'm inadequate. Here's my best friend with a dying wife, and I can't even think of what to say to him or her. So rather than say anything at all, I'm just going to recede into the background, which is kind of pretending it's not happening.
And that did happen because throughout the last couple of years before Tony passed away, I lost a lot of friends because of it, because they don't know how to react, they don't know what to say, or, even towards the very end, when a couple people did come over and they would say, oh, he looks great, and I'm like, really? Are you, because that's just a natural thing to say. And sometimes people who can't can't handle their own feelings of death and dying and don't know what to say, to them the best thing is to walk away. And I appreciated that and understood their feelings, but at the same token, when you need your friends there and they're not there, I went from having a traditional marriage that was wonderful to taking care of a child and then taking care of, an infant at the end. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. And support, communication, it was, to me, what needed to be fixed.
Community.
Here we are, having come full circle. Fortunately, Dr. Ceppetelli, you've worked with people who have wonderfully positive outcomes. What can you tell us about John Rackley?
John Rackley is an incomplete quadriplegic, which means he can move his hands, who got injured, broke his neck on a trampoline. And this next 4 or 5 minute clip we're going to show, John eloquently explains what happens when you get full family and community support.
Wonderful.
17 years ago on Memorial Day, I was on a trampoline and it was at my wife's ex-husband's house actually. And the trampoline just got set up and I got on it and broke my neck. And I was in the hospital for 10 days in Portsmouth Hospital, and then they transferred me to Northeast Rehab in Salem, New Hampshire, and I was in there for 126 days, and I had a halo for, I think, 121 of them. But I never got bummed out or anything, so I don't know if it was because of the family or what, but I've been doing fine.
So how did you get involved with your first wheelchair? What happened?
With the first Renegade?
Yeah.
Well, I invented this chair called the Renegade. It's an 8-speed geared chair that uses push bars to operate, because going out, working in the yard, or going out in the woods or whatever, and especially if there was any snow, your tires would get whatever you're wheeling through on them, and your hands would get all messed up or cold and you couldn't push. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to come up with an idea of a wheelchair where I won't have to put my hands on the wheels. So I came up with this lever propelled chair that I have outside, and I can work in the yard, I go hunting, fishing. Because of the chair I can do pretty much anything. And I work pretty much every day, all day, and I just enjoy being outside and doing stuff.
So tell me what the deer last year you got. Talked about the deer.
Oh, I got a 8-point, 202-pound buck, and I was out there, and I hunt by myself. I don't like, because, other people mess me up. More scent and everything else, so, but yeah, the chair has all these different attachments to it, and it has like a fishing pole holder, a hunting blind, a gun rack, a trailer hitch, snow plow. And well, when I'm wheeling in the woods, I'm actually hidden because I put brush in the chair and I'm like a moving bush. Actual deer don't have any idea that I'm there. So yeah, the thing is now I am actually way more successful than my able-bodied friends. So, and I think I do more work around the house than them too.
I've a question, John.
Yep.
When you discovered you could no longer walk,
Yep.
what did that do to you internally? I mean, you said you kept going and it never kind of
It never
got to
really
you.
got to me.
And how were you able to, I mean, thinking about the life drive, so there was something going on with you that was...
I don't know if it's how you're brought up
Mm-hmm.
or your work ethic or what it is, but yeah, it never bothered me. And it's strange to this day, you know, because I think about it now. Well, actually, a friend of mine I went fishing with last weekend, he said, John, a month before you got hurt, you said, if I got hurt, and it was weird because I was a builder. And I said, I don't know if I could handle it. You know, I think I'd jump off the bridge or something, and it never was like that at all. So, but the doctor goes, yeah, John, you might not have any upper body, you know, strength or anything, or, you know, walk again. Sorry, I get choked up sometimes.
We all do.
All right, so I told my wife, I'm gonna look like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, so from the beginning, you just decided, I'm going to beat this.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
So what this video shows, what John says in this video clearly is that with a full family and community support, he was able to get his life drive and go back to the activities that he loved his whole life, and he lives a rich and meaningful life now.
What a fantastic example. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that Robin and millions of other people are, or Robin's, your husband, you lost your husband because he was terminally ill. The will to live could and probably did in those 8 years after his diagnosis enhance his life, quality of life. But that didn't save his life.
It didn't save his life. He had the will to live right up until the day he died.
That must have been inspirational for you.
It was. It was.
So, but given that, so that's your given, and John Rackley, this could have been a death sentence for John Rackley,
Oh, absolutely.
but he was able to turn it around.
Yes.
What is our action plan now? I know, Christina, you work with people all over the state of Massachusetts.
Correct.
You work with the caregivers, you see patients. What can we get out of this discussion?
What I would like to say about this discussion, I have looked at all of the previous segments, and I want to respond to segment 9. Dr. Ceppetelli gave the most interesting and symbolic communication / non-verbal communication when he talked about the stroke victim. The symbolic part of that is the patient kept these blankets up to his neck, and he was the symbolic part of that would be keeping the cold nurses away. When Dr. Ceppetelli showed how much he listened and cared, he pulled off the blankets. So there's a symbolic and a non-communication involved in that. That's just one good example of that.
Of what can happen.
Exactly.
So that's something that any of us who's in a caretaker role, needs to be aware of? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, and especially nurses and nurses' aides and anybody who cares for patients should be trained into listening to symbolic communication
Right.
and nonverbal communication, facial expressions, and so forth. So when somebody has started yelling and screaming, which I'd like to bring in very quickly, the medical model, most nursing facilities look at the medical model.
Which is what?
Which is really, I'm going to right into medications. Medications is the answer for everybody in their mind. When somebody yells, when somebody does this, somebody does that, even a delusional aspect. And then it's like, they need a medication. Medications is not the answer. Don't get me wrong, there's an occasional times when medications are needed.
Particularly painkillers.
I'm talking about psychotropic medications, okay? Antipsychotics, even antidepressants. Antidepressants. If you have a person who's listening to you, that is much more effective than an antidepressant. And there are studies about the talk therapy, by the way. But on top of that, it's also then with the nurses and the amount of stimulation that happens in these facilities, that with too much stimulation, both the nursing staff and residents do not have the ability to listen or be heard.
What
because
kinds of
this
stimulation? Are you talking actually about noise,
I'm talking
machinery, or-
about noise, the stress that nursing and CNAs are under to get the tasks done, to do the custodial care, which Dr. Ceppetelli spoke of, feeding, eating, cleaning, and all that kind of stuff for safety. However, the emotional communications then seem to get dismissed because everybody is in the task-oriented piece. And so when something goes wrong, give a medication and it will fix it.
Right.
So the other side of that is, if from the top down, I'm talking from administrations down to director of nurses, down to social workers, if they had a forum that we could talk about how to do the receptive listening that we've been constantly talking about
in this series?
in the series, how to pay attention to people's cultures, what their role is in the family culture, and so forth. And you would save much more time in the end if you were able then to do the approaches into what the patient's needs, not what the staff needs. Sometimes I feel like we're medicating staff versus
I'd like to add one
patients.
point to what Chris is saying, and that is what staff and what caregivers need to do is, first of all, think about, why am I feeling the way I am, and why is this person saying or doing what they're doing right now?
Right.
The medical model just kind of
Excellent.
skips that and goes to, I need to quiet down this person.
And
Right.
on top of that, Dr. Ceppetelli, is the people learning what their own feelings are about the aging process, about their fear of them acting up, as they get older, ending up in a nursing facility.
And this
so
goes,
that's so important.
excuse me. This goes back to Robin,
Yes.
who brought us this powerful illustration about being the home caretaker and being left. You were really on your own little island
was.
there, surrounded by people,
Yep.
many of whom you knew, but essentially isolated.
I was. Yep. Very isolated.
This is fascinating, and I have to be the bearer of bad news now. We're out of time.
Oh.
Christina Healy, Robin Enos, Ron Ceppetelli, it's been a pleasure.
Thank
Thank you.
I'm Naomi Arenberg, and this concludes the final segment of our 10-part series, Emotions and the Aging Process. Get in touch. We'd like to hear from you. We need to hear from you with your questions and comments. VermontSMP.org/emotions.